So we've got a panel session tonight. And if you can introduce yourself, I'd be very grateful. So first up is Jo. So Jo's a member of the task force and she's got a lot of other strings to her bow. So Jo.
Thank you, Martin. Yeah, so it's lovely to sort of not meet everyone, but virtually. So I'm Jo Jolly at the Environment Agency. I'm a Deputy Director leading our new bespoke and emerging projects team with a remit to really transform how we deliver projects. And as Martin said, this isn't just within the Environment Agency, this is across the whole project delivery profession, because why wouldn't we? I'm also a director of Construction Data Limited, which is a not-for-profit company that is set up to run the first construction data trust, where we will be pooling data to get greater insights across the construction sector to radically transform performance and again to achieve benefit for the greater good. I'm the chair of the cross-government working group, which we'll be talking about hopefully a bit throughout the discussion this evening, and also a founding member of the Project Data Analytics Task Force. And when I was thinking about my introduction, I thought, well, that's a list of things I do. But really what I want to say is what is it I care about? I really, really care about the project delivery profession. I think it's one of the most extraordinary professions you can be in, and what we can achieve as a community if we collaborate like we never have before will be extraordinary. I care about doing all that we can through the profession for the climate emergency. And ultimately, I really care about creating the environment for people to be at their creative best so that we can do this. So I really look forward to the discussion this evening. Thank you.
Okay, superb. Thank you, Jo. And Breda.
Evening, everybody. Breda Ryan, Director of Programme Controls at Jacobs Major Programmes and Projects Group. I lead the function of controls across all of our major projects, connecting people and trying to get similarity and equivalency in approach across all of our major projects. When they have a tendency to go insular, we want them to open up and share information, share methodology, and hopefully one day share data. But that's a ways to come. So currently I'm also Programme Controls Director on the Lower Thames Crossing project. So it's a busy environment, so full-on hands-on practitioner world that I live in, which I truly love. And I co-chair the PDA research work stream with Jo and with Ron, and that's fabulous. So if you want to join in us, there's so much we have to do. It's not a choice anymore. We just have to crack on with it. And just building what Jo was saying, what I love doing in my job is finding space, because we are all squashed for time, and finding space for creative thinking so we can problem solve better. We are literally squashed in our days, back-to-back meetings all the time, days full of transactional waste, which is my pet hate, where we can possibly automate and put better improvements and workflows in place so we have that time to do the real work, which is change the future.
Brilliant, Breda. Thanks for joining the panel tonight. Appreciate it. And Daniel.
Hi all. So I'm going to try and keep these short and sweet like myself. So my name is Daniel Nicholls. I head up the APM's research programs, the Association of Project Management. I supported our work in project data really for the last kind of 2 years. Very pleased and privileged to collaborate with Martin and other colleagues from across the profession. So welcome and thank you for joining us this evening.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Simon?
Hi everyone. So I'm Simon Davies. I'm the head of program portfolio and project management for KBR. So we call it head of P3M. KBR is Kellogg, Brown and Root. We're a multinational sort of corporate company. I've been working about 20 years in delivering projects. I'm a chartered professional and fellow of the Association of Project Management. I'm currently a member on the committee of the APM Corporate Advisory Group and also a professional civils engineer. I've worked across contractor, consultant, client representative roles, and so I've got quite a good breadth in seeing how things differ depending on which role you take on a project. And where the responsibilities of data, etc. lie. I've just about completing my MBA, where I've specialised in digital transformation of businesses. So I've seen and constantly written a lot about the academic trends, where everything's going, and it is coming, and it is coming fast. Part of my role, it's new in the business. We've now realised that it is growing very fast, and we don't want to be a laggard in this space. So my major challenge is to get our business more mature in its thinking. And the first challenge is to convince all the current leaders and all the current senior managers what is digital, what is data, why is it important. No one understands what sits behind a dashboard. No one understands real time and things like that. So I'm very excited in this group, and I think it is the future, and I think it's good. There's already new job titles being created in the world. I think it's the first time I'm now adding data engineer, data scientist in a project controls team. And it's all very, very new. So looking forward to the chat.
And Andy, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for asking me to gate crash, Martin, as this session. Yeah, so my background, 30 years in projects and program management, started as a practitioner, then moved on to consultant, and now I head up the Major Projects Association. I've also had a hand in developing a lot of best practice guidance, and my interest in data and data analytics starts from where I first started in projects. I worked for a very much a data-driven organization with Japanese ownership, and everything we did was based upon data and analytics, and that was really from its manufacturing environment, but it did bleed over into our projects environment as well. And one of the things that's shocked me, through my career, and particularly, when I've been working on best practice frameworks, for example, like Prince 2, we spend a lot of time perfecting these methodologies and these processes, and then we base them on rubbish data or no data at all. And frankly, project management, without data is winging it. It's not management. It's just making it up as we go along. And that's my passion, to stop us winging it and to stop us making it up, so that we can apply these methodologies based upon real data and not just made up data.
Cool. Fantastic. And a big thanks to Simon, because Simon's coming out the back end of COVID. So thanks for joining us tonight, Simon. I do appreciate it. And I'm Martin Paver, so I'm the Chief Exec of Project Success, the co-chair of the Project Data Analytics Task Force, the founder of the community, and the data steward for the data trust and various other things we're doing. So this is a passion of mine. It's been a calling for the past 5 years. I love it. Right, so let's jump into the panel session. So first question is, maybe you could chip into this one as well, Andy, but we'll let Daniel go first, which is the story behind this Getting Started guide. Could you just describe what it is, Daniel, and where it came from and why the sort of APMs behind it?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you. Thanks, Martin. Just to cover this off, so in case you haven't heard of this so far, we put out a Getting Started in Project Data guide in partnership with the PDA Task Force and the Major Project Association. And really, it was to kind of help individuals help understand what project data analytics is, the technology and practice being used, how you can maybe maximize potential, avoid pitfalls. And it was really developed for anyone starting out in project data, but also those more senior individuals, those looking to maybe develop a project data strategy. And really, what it came out of is what we were hearing from the profession is a lot of ambiguity. People hear these terms, project data, artificial intelligence, machine learning, Internet of Things, and then often interchangeably, you could argue. And there was a real kind of lack of kind of data literacy, and really ourselves at APM wanted to come together with partner organizations, as I mentioned, to start to try and unpick some of this, and also to kind of to provide some kind of leadership and guidance or direction, if you like, for the profession. And we also seen this from an APM side, that what part of our remit as a chartered body is to explore new and emergent topics, really. And so really over the last 2 years, we've had a kind of research and discovery phase to start to unpick some of this, working with partners, developing a huge range of kind of resources. So really pleased to be able to put this out there, and as I say, to help signpost some of the work that's going on within the profession through kind of case studies. And we think it's quite a very easily pick up resource for anyone to use.
So is this something, Daniel, which is sort of exploratory at the moment? Are your corporate members starting to pull on this, or they start to ask for it, or is it more push from the APM? What are you finding at the moment?
Well, I think initially when we first started talking about project data, I think when I first started looking at this in about 2018, it was quite a peripheral topic, but certainly I think we've seen an acceleration really during the pandemic, the kind of great interest around kind of project data analytics. And there's been a huge amount of interest from corporate partners. So it's become, in my personal opinion anyway, one of the top 3 areas of interest for kind of corporates within the profession. And there's always lots of requests for people to come out and deliver talks or events, particularly around case studies. So how have organizations started to apply project data analytics effectively? I mean, we carried out a major study called Dynamic Conditions Project Success, which is the world's largest study around project success very recently. And what we found within this study is actually data was one of the 9 dynamic conditions. And with over 70% of people taking part in this research, noting it was really important or very important. So again, we've kind of seen the huge growth in this as the major topic area. Possibly, you could argue, maybe only behind Agile in terms of the topical areas that people kind of seek, I would say, at the moment.
That's cool. So there you go. Right, it's on the APM's agenda. It's going to be part of your careers. Hold on tight. It's not just about project managers. Well, this is about project delivery profession overall. Right. So Andy and Breda, you've been involved in this as well in terms of its creation, members of the task force. So what's your view on this getting started guide? Where did it come about, etc.?
Just to back up everyone, I actually have it on my desk printed in small in a little refer guide, and I actually, because I kept referring to it so much, that's how good I thought it was, I printed it off. So
Well done.
Reinforce, it is actually a great document.
Cool.
Well, to be honest, Simon, that thought has crossed my mind as well, because I do want to litter the site office with it, not literally, but strategically place it in all the meeting rooms for people to get their heads around it. And the real benefit this little document brings, it's a very easy read, and we have a challenge on upping our data literacy. So Dan, you've just really pinpointed that people do use these terms interchangeably. They have no real clue what they mean. And we may all be familiar with APIs to get data from one kit to the other, but that's about the extent of it, if we're honest. So we have to bring everybody on a journey with us. This guide simplifies it, makes it a little bit easy to digest. You can have it around a cup of coffee in the site office or anywhere really, and you know, engage with it. So for me, it's bringing it to the people who need that education in a nice, gentle and professional way.
Cool, thank you. And Andy?
Yeah, so I think what the reason it came about and how it came about is that, you know, the feedback we were getting from the task force was that there was a lot of mystique around data analytics, and there was a lot of misunderstanding, and that sort of mystique and misunderstanding was just putting people off. So the focus of the guide was very much, you know, what it says on the, you know, its title is about getting people started and helping to overcome that fear that it's not science fiction and future stuff. It's things that we can do now, and it's a lot of things we can do now with many off-the-shelf products, and actually many tools that these enterprises have already paid for under their corporate licenses. So you can just start doing it today. And that was the point that we tried to get across with the Getting Started guide. This isn't about future stuff. This is about stuff you can do now.
Cool, thank you. And lots of this tech, right, it's available. Some of it's free as well. The Python stuff's free. You can pick up these things as building blocks and modules and start to drive it forward at your own pace, right? And what we're trying to do is to accelerate that. So the next question is associated with the opportunity for individuals, so for your own careers and your own progression versus an organization as well. Is this about dashboards or is this so much more? And Breda and Joe, if you fancy having a go at that. Who's going to go first?
Are we going in that order?
That's fine. Yeah, I'll go first. So it is way more than dashboards. So for me, your question is around the opportunities for individuals and organizations. You mean around how they change their careers or how they do their jobs, or both? Because actually it is all of that. So for me, there's a distinction between metrics and dashboards and useful information. And we are littered at the minute with dashboards galore, with metrics and I call them quants. So one of my sessions a week or so ago in the site office, just sit down with the team and say, "Oh, you're talking to me about our quants," and they want numbers on their dashboards because that's what they're familiar with. But I said, yeah, that's just the quantification of something you planned, and there's the actual measure of how it's going. But now we need to convert it into real information around what does that mean? And what does it mean to you continuously if you don't keep meeting your plan and your actuals keep slipping? So we had a conversation, a fundamental conversation around data literacy, so that they could understand what would be useful for them in a dashboard, so they can actually look at trends and predictability and look forward rather than just counting up the numbers, which is historically where a lot of these KPIs and dashboards have come from. So for me, there's huge opportunity for every individual to upskill and reskill as needs be, to move the dial and basically understand what the data is telling them. And we have a learning curve to go through on that, and we've got quite a journey to bring all of our organizations with us on it, irrespective of their size and shape. For me, it's just about being open and having that dialogue with them and helping them and enabling them so that they don't feel overwhelmed by what's in their way. We get a lot of requests in my world for a dashboard because it's perceived to be the answer. But sometimes we then go back and look at the underlying process of how they're going to get that data, the frequency of how they're going to get that data, and we work through an awful lot more additional criteria for people to understand where, for me, where the waste is in the process and where the non-value add steps are, and how they can get data flowing in more effectively and more efficiently. And it's not an overnight process. It's a journey we're on. So for me, there's huge opportunity for individuals and organizations to radically reform and refine where they're headed.
So do you think this is a tweak or is this a transformation?
I would say it's both, to be honest, Martin, because for individuals, every little bit they tweak builds up into a transformation. So sometimes we find that the little bits nudge and the bigger transformation comes in and all around. So for me, it's a bi-directional approach. If every individual tweaks a little bit, we get somewhere.
Yeah. So I'd be interested in Joe's view about the tweak or the transformation, because I think from a client, if you push this, you start to facilitate the transformation. So I'll welcome your view on that as well, Joe. So about the individual and organizational impact, and the opportunity, right? So there's a threat in there, but there's also an opportunity. Go for it.
I think there's a massive opportunity, Martin, and I feel that, not only professionally do we have an opportunity to do this, I think we've got an absolute duty to do it. I've been reflecting so much on this, and I think, so many of our practices and things that we do and rely on and just seem normal to us in project delivery were really created decades ago. And if we think now that, the vast majority of the world's data has been generated in the last 2 years, we've got machine learning, we've got AI, our understanding of human psychology has transformed over the last 10 years, maybe. So, I strongly believed if we design project delivery today from a blank sheet of paper with everything that we have now, we would not be designing what we're doing today. So for that reason alone, it's transformational. Now, I absolutely agree with starting somewhere. Start somewhere, start doing. Everybody is talking about this. Very few people are doing. So, for example, from the hack back in October, brilliant teams of people developed a UN Sustainable Development Goals benefits realisation app. And Jonathan Williams, in collaboration with Projecting Success, has been developing that into a more complete version of the app. And we're going to open source it because we can. So we're going to do that. So imagine if every project delivery professional looks to maximise the benefits of every single project far beyond the original stated goals, simply by making choices on their projects. Imagine the difference we can make. I don't know what difference we can make, can't quantify it. I don't care, don't need to quantify it. It will just be a better world than if we didn't. So I think so much of this is about mindset. And I think that's the element of starting somewhere, because the minute you start to see this differently, a whole world opens up to you. But please don't be in any doubt that this is transformational. And as Simon said, that the companies that don't see this coming and the clients that don't see this coming are going to be left behind. And it just keeps making me think of Kodak. They knew the changes were coming. And what did they do? They just stuck with their production of film, of camera film, when they knew that electronic cameras, digital cameras were coming, and they were left behind. As a client, I know that I have a huge levers, let's just be really plain about this, huge levers in what I request, in what I'm asking my delivery partners to do with me, that's really important, in full collaboration. But also, let's not underestimate the scale of the transformation, and that it will only be those companies in the future who really get on board with this. And sorry, I shouldn't say the future, it's now, isn't it? I mean, Breda, Jacobs are designing motorways through automation. We're not doing that manually anymore. It's just extraordinary when we think that we've got these things in our day-to-day lives. I can get hold of any data anytime. If I order a bunch of flowers and send them to you, Martin, I know exactly where they are, exactly when they've arrived. I come to my project, what can I get hold of? What can I get hold of? And the bits that I can get hold of, typically time, cost and quality, isn't it? But what are the things in a lessons learnt workshop that people tell you with the winning things? Why did a project fly? Because we had great collaboration, because we had great team spirit, we had trust. And what about the projects that fail? Toxic culture. I couldn't tell people when things were going wrong. We did not have psychological safety. But we don't measure those things. And we can measure them, and we can use AI to get real insights into human behaviour on projects, so that you see those lead indicators when things are beginning to go wrong in the team, when the team don't even know it themselves, and far beyond, sooner than you'll ever see in any time, cost and quality dashboard. People disengage with dashboards because ultimately they're of very little help. So people vote with their feet, they get drawn to what's valuable, and dashboards aren't valuable. And if we think tweaking around the edges is going to make a difference, you know, we're wasting our time, and we will not get to half greenhouse gas emissions in 8 years' time. Can I finish with one statistic, Martin, that Jonathan Williams gave to me on Friday? I think Jonathan's on the call, and I hope he doesn't mind me sharing this, because it was his insight and his inspiration that saw this connection. But he'd recently done his carbon footprint on, I think it might have been the WWF website, but he'd worked out his carbon footprint. And then he looked at the projects across the Environment Agency to look to see what the current carbon reporting was, the average. And so based on one project, that's the equivalent of 7,759 people, or 100 of Jonathan Williams's lifetime carbon footprints. So as project delivery professionals, that's the scale of the impact we can have. 100 lifetimes on one project. We can make that difference. Why aren't we?
It's massive. It's massive. I'd agree, Joe. And it's not just about looking at carbon metrics and things like that. It's all the waste that goes with it. You know, we keep making the same mistakes time and time again. It's a system impact. And I think at the moment we're not looking at it as a system. We're looking at it as, you know, let's do some carbon counting and then we'll fill some forms in. It's so much more than that. And I think we can drive that. We can drive that as a community, and I think we will. Does anybody else want to come in on that before I move on?
I just want to be a slight devil's advocate and make a controversial statement about carbon capture and data, because there's a paradox that exists that actually the more data we collect and the more data we create, it actually gets stored in very energy hungry servers. The cloud's still buildings that are full of it. I know there's a lot of companies that are looking to have service centers that are neutral and on clean energy, etc., like that. But I'm always very mindful when I say to people about the data being created and getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and carbon capture, when those two things get added together, I always try and say, can we think about the supply chain where that data is being stored? And there's lots of things you can do: data cleaning up, data archiving, data deleting what's not actually required, data hoarding should be avoided. So I just always want to connect those two when I hear it in a conversation.
Cool. So in terms of that as well, if we start to pull some of this data, so it's all stored in lots of different places at the moment, and there's different instances. And somebody said to me recently, let's start to pull a load of truck data. I said, well, it's already on the internet, right? So you can draw it down, web scrape it, and we can start to teach people to do that. So it's stored in the original location. You run a Python script and it'll rip it out, and it'll give you the latest version, the latest truck, and you can do your logistics and work out the carbon footprint associated with that, right? Let's start to democratize this stuff, because it's wrong is that people are making money out of it, right? It's about saving the planet, making sure, my kids have got somewhere to live, right? So that's great stuff, right? So next question is, how do people get started, right? So we've got the getting started guide, but what's the reality out there? How are people getting started? And I see two schools of thought on this. I see some people think, well, what we need is we need all data engineering sorted, and then we need to work out the training needs analysis. So what do we need to train people with? And then we need a career pathway. And then we need to work out, what's the GDPR implications of all this? So we need to lock it all down and put secure, It sounds like it's going to take them 10 years to do it. And I'm picking up that other people are just getting on with it. So what's your view about, the best way of getting started? Who fancies having a go at that?
I'm happy to jump on that, as it is literally what I'm trying to do at the moment. I find that there is very, very little resistance in anyone getting started. What is missing is the framework in the business and the culture to get it going. So I actually just think that it's almost like it's the pathway of learning as well. So obviously, it's a nice plug, the apprenticeship, which is great, but also we're doing a lot of in-house, and again, this is done by leadership, in-house training courses, literacy, working groups. And I think as soon as you put that framework out there, people are jumping on it. Anyone below sort of 30 years old knows this inherent anyway. I mean, I went to an open day for my eldest's daughter the other day, who's 9 years old, and they're developing apps at school. Office 365 Power Queries and stuff. We all think this is cutting edge stuff at the moment. It's being taught by, to high school students. So I think actually to get people started, there's already people in there. There's already people coming through the pipeline. So I think putting the framework in place, which is we've talked about the terminology, and leaders allowing people the time to develop. Pretty much, let's be honest, anyone who's like 25 plus or 30 plus, that's really your target audience.
Cool. And anybody else want to come in on that?
Yeah, I'd like to, Martin. We've started the journey by sort of the coalition of the willing, really. So, and particularly starting with the apprenticeship, the project data analytics apprenticeship. It's particularly unique. It's particularly focused on the project delivery profession, and from that, we've started to have our own champions and our own leaders, basically lighting little fires. And Jonathan Williams, again, an extraordinary example of just how this can grow. I think beyond that, you can start to build something more structured and planned. But I think just starting, again, is so important. So find your coalition of the willing, sign up to the apprenticeship and just get started. I think, as you say, Simon, for leaders to understand it at the level they need to. And I still get the sense, even from people sort of close-ish to this, that there's still a sense that, oh yeah, all that data stuff. But what we're doing with data analytics is actually decomposing the problem in the first place. So we're looking at releasing capacity. Capacity is a massive problem all across the industry. No one can recruit for love nor money. And we keep saying we don't have enough resources, we don't have enough resources. We'll never have enough resources. We need to do things differently. We need to work more efficiently, free up the mundane, repetitive tasks, and also release humans from what they're fundamentally no good at, and allow the humans to focus on the value-added part. So we need to be doing this, but so data analytics in itself can help us decompose the problem. Because at the moment, what I see is people are sort of thrashing around trying to understand what the problem is, and they can't even see that because it's too complex. Whereas the use of graph databases and analytics can really help us to decompose a problem in the way that our brains are just not capable of doing. So it's as much a tool to resolve problems and understand the world around us as it is doing data. I think that's almost the last thing we need to be thinking about. In a way, sorry, Martin, that's heresy. I didn't mean it to sound like that. There's just a story to be told around this, Martin, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. Yeah. And I do struggle with some of that, right? So the dashboard arguments and things like that, right? Let's put more and more dashboards out there. It's this red pill argument, right? And Joe, you've swallowed the red pill, and so's Jonathan. You see the world in a different place. So you've popped out of this matrix, right? It is the matrix. Everybody believes that, project delivery is the same thing we've done the last 30 years, right? That's the matrix everybody's living in. And you've popped out, you've seen a completely different world. What do we need to do to help people to digest the red pill to the extent that you and Jonathan's done?
Was that a question to me? Sorry.
Yes, please. Yeah.
So I'm so sorry. I was just typing, actually. Skills. It starts with skills and knowledge and understanding. Because until you've got that, and actually in our cross-government working group, we had a brilliant session, again, run by Jonathan. He's getting lots of name checks tonight. And we sort of went through what are the, what's the aspiration, what are the blocks, and it all boiled down to skills and knowledge and understanding. That was the biggest thing we had to unlock to release everything that we could do around the full potential of data and analytics. So I'll say it again, the apprenticeship training for senior leaders. Jo Stamford's a massive advocate at the NHS. She's been doing exactly this with her senior leaders. For us all to understand it to the level we need to, but purely thinking about it as data and that stuff data people do, or even data analytics, it is something quite different. If you take nothing else from this session, it is not about data and the stuff that those data people do.
Yeah.
Andy, a question for you is about, it's perceived to be, right, let's take the project management process and let's automate bits of the process. Whereas what Joe's advocating is let's reimagine some of that process. So where do you stand on that, Andy?
Yeah, there's two things I'd like to add. So first of all, in terms of getting started, there's I think we should be using lots of nudge tactics wherever we can as well. So and if we got any sort of heads of on the in this session this evening, just something simple like all projects should have a data strategy. We as a species, we're really good at copying, and so some of your organization will get it right, and other people will start copying them. So that's that bottom up approach does work, but it needs that central nudge. So that's something that could be done. And then you're right in terms of the process. Automating some aspects of the current project management paradigm, if you like, isn't necessarily the right thing to do. So, I've discussed this before, but if you take risk management is, an abstract of our thinking of uncertainty and our way of understanding uncertainty, and then we put it into a two-dimensional grid, called a risk register. And then we give it, probability and impacts, and then we try to understand it. Now, risks do not work that way. I know we then start to apply Monte Carlo analysis against it, but even that is doing, some simulation against potentially some dirty data going in, and then we treat the answer as the truth, and then we act upon that truth. So I think, the reimagining of some of our processes you know, there are two that are in my crosshairs at the moment, and that is risk management is one. And I think we can have a far more data-driven approach to understanding what are the predisposition to uncertainties for a project based upon its characteristics and conditions, and then, you know, taking it from others, and then we can think about whether we're going to treat those predispositions or ignore them. And then the other one would be stakeholder engagement as well. That's another one where we try to simplify it by putting an abstraction of our understanding of a really complex world, and we'll do again another 2x2 grid, you know, interest and influence, and then we pop people on that, and it's just not as simple as that. Far better to understand, you know, the sentiment of stakeholders, and understand again whether we're going to do something about it or whether we can, you know, choose to do nothing about it in each instance. So yeah, we will end up with different processes going forward where data analytics provides us a better understanding of what the management processes truly need to be, rather than the ones that we've got in place at the moment, which are a bit of a sticking plaster over our abstract models of how complex things work.
And it feels like there's so much to go after, Andy, right? There's so much. So risk management, I call it the human process of guessing what's going to go wrong on a project, right? We've got so much data out there. We don't need to guess anymore. You know, this predisposition. I think we're entering a brand new world, and it's full of opportunity. You know, if I was 20 years older now, I mean younger, sorry, I'll be piling in and trying to shape all this future. It is huge.
Yeah, and of course, when we apply,
it shouldn't get rid of the process of doing the risk workshop, though, because the data's great, but it's the process of getting people in a room to discuss it so they're aware of it. And I think a lot of the times we're in danger of like taking data and okay, that ticked on the risk register. It's the human factor of actually talking through it. We mustn't forget.
Yeah, and then Simon, it's a part of that data literacy that we talked about earlier, and I would like to add numeracy to that, because you know, when you do those risk workshops, and this is where I think you know, data analytics can help inform the risk workshops, is that we'll get, you know, discussions around probability. So how likely is this risk to occur on my project? And we'll get people saying, well, it's not very likely, and they'll say 30%. Now, 30% in real terms is quite, you know, that's likely in terms of the need to mitigate or treat or not. You know, that's basically saying almost 1 in 3 projects will have this risk occurring on this project. And people don't understand probabilities in those ways, which is a number in a population. And when you start to convey it in that way, and we can use better data insights to convey it in that way, we'll make better decisions. Whereas, you know, probability and, you know, and it gets translated into a spreadsheet or into a tool, it's really quite unhelpful, particularly when you're making decisions on an individual project, because whatever you put will be wrong, because it'll either happen 100% or it doesn't happen 0%. And then the ability to square off your probability somewhere between 0 and 100 doesn't really work. So numeracy, I think, will really help with those things. But you just say it's the process of going through to say what could go wrong, and how do we inform that discussion based upon the insights that are available for us, you know, from elsewhere.
I'd like to push it a little bit further as well, right? Let's get some debate going here. So in terms of the risk management process, right, at the moment, it is people writing down risks in terms of what is likely to go wrong, right? If we flip it around and say, what is the potential for variance, right? In your risk register, you won't say, if I'm working with my design company, they're going to send me a load of drawings that's got mistakes in it. I'll have to send them back and then send it back again, and lots of technical queries or whatever, which is going to cost me 2 months on my program, right? We don't do that because they're all quite small. Incrementally, they're quite small, but they all add up to a big number. So we're not managing variance in the aggregate. We're just looking at the big hitters through the risk register because that's what the process tells us to do. So I'd say let's unpick the process and start to look at the clustering of variance and work out what we can do to address that. So it's then driven by the data. It's not driven by the process.
One of my favorite exercises that goes with the risk register is actually when you go through your schedule and you do the variance on every activity as the worst case, best case, and you actually combine the PERT master analysis of your likely completion date with your risk register. So when people talk about risk, there's many different tools that we're using, and with data literacy as well that combines together. I don't think it's ever really done, because historically we have various risk software and we have a P6 schedule, etc. No one combines them. There's two separate workshops done at two separate times. So I think that's where things could be done smarter.
And Joe, you just posted something about the bottlenecks app. Could you explain that?
Yeah, of course. So again, another follow-on from the October hack is we've been further developing one of the apps that was developed superbly over 48 hours. But we've developed it to be deployed within the Environment Agency for starters. We're going to trial it, but then of course we're going to open source everything, so everything will be available to anybody to use. The idea being that we were recognizing that we can see some of these, a bit, almost exactly like you said, Martin, we can see some of the big things that are delaying projects or holding people up, bottlenecks, what's slowing us down. But actually what we came to realise is it's more likely it's the 10 things every single day. It's the fact that it took 3 goes to get your purchase order through the system. It's the fact that a project code maybe took 6 weeks to come, and because somebody was out and you didn't know who to speak to, and this, that and the other. And then actually you've pushed your program out, then you've missed the construction window, then you've, you know, the knock-ons can be huge from one small issue, but we can't see them, they're invisible. And the project managers, the project teams don't really have a voice in this space. And yes, we say escalate or put it in an exception report or use the governance, but you don't on these little things every day. So we've developed an app which we're going to start trialing very shortly, where people can just say what's holding me up right now, and anyone can use it, and we'll start to get real-time information about what's holding people up where and why, and also begin to empower the teams with community learning. So if somebody worked out how to get the project code because they knew to speak to, you know, John instead of Keith or something, speak to John, you know, and you start to get that community learning and community empowerment. And let's face it, turn the tables on people like me. So if I'm saying, why haven't you lot delivered? I wouldn't say that, I really wouldn't. But it'll say, well, Joe, I reported this 6 months ago. Nothing's changed. I'm still struggling with this thing. 6 months, 10 of us have seen, you know, so I love the sort of power shift. I love the enabling the people, I love the community learning, and I love the real-time insights on the 100 things that slow us down and impact well-being, grind away at resilience of our brilliant people. So yeah, I think the analogy is similar. It just made me think of it, Martin, when you said that.
Yeah, cool. So your challenges, everybody, right, is that we've got so much we want to do, but we're aiming at the wrong people, right? Project professionals, by their very nature, are maxed out delivering projects. They haven't got time to do any of this, right? So what do we do? Right, I'm finding that. I'm finding, you know, I'm talking to project professionals and say, you know, I've got this brave new world, come and swallow the red pill. I say, no, I'm too busy, Martin, driving around on square wheels. So what do we do to change it? Who fancies picking that up? Right? And it's a problem I experience day in, day out. So it's real. And I'm sure you do as well. I definitely know Breda does.
For sure. So someone else can tell me the right answer.
So what do we do to fix it?
The whole idea is to make people's lives easier. And the problem is the messaging isn't quite there at the moment. Everyone's setting up these apps and these solutions with many email notifications on it. It started off with the early days of SharePoint where, you know, you haven't done it, workflow, and you end up getting half your emails are just auto, like you haven't done this yet, you haven't. So people, when they design this, need to really think about the end user. That's my sort of first step. I always say to people, please don't put a workflow in there. I'm happy that the data is around, but I want someone to talk to someone when it's not happening. I don't want you to rely that it's going to be in someone's inbox and it's going to get actioned. That's the sort of the main thing. The other thing we're dealing with a lot now is people on site with SMASIT technology, Internet of Things. We've just mobilized a big project where we've taken over from an incumbent with people, I won't mention any names, with like 30 years of working practices on site, and we're giving them these mobile devices and these, you know, asset management software, and we're saying, and they just see it as we're tracking you, we're monitoring you, etc. When it should be making their lives easier. For example, you're not having to go back to the office to get the drawing or the schematic, it's there on your device. So a lot of it is about the messages. As long as we say what is getting easier, as someone said earlier on, it's the getting rid of the automation and giving the value add that the human actually brings. It's that messaging. You know, people think this data is changing their jobs, etc., but we all know it's actually going to create jobs. There's so much of it that needs handling. So that's those are my usual quick messages to anyone on a project when they're managing data.
So I think it's about the superpowers as well, like getting rid of all this mundane stuff and unleashing your inner superpowers. And these superpowers are to look into the future and preempt where things are going to go pear-shaped, so you can intervene earlier. Now, if people can do that instead of just munging through processes, surely your pay's all going to go up. You're going to have a much more fulfilling job. You know, I think that's some of the messaging we should be putting out there as well. You know, release your inner superpower. I can see it now, Breda.
Oh,
It's
it's
cape.
coming. So a little bit controversial now for me in that, yes, I can see the vision of the future that I want us to arrive at. We are within a framework in major projects, infrastructure projects, that have a whole bunch of rules and regs and you name it around us. So we have to operate in a very constrained environment overall and account to many different bodies for how we're performing. So while I have this future vision and aspiration to bring my teams along that journey, they're continually constrained. So what I've got to do is try and empower them to be a little bit better each time. I deliberately go back to process, because if they know the process and know the steps, then they can see and be masters of their destiny of how they can simplify everything. So when you bring simplification into it, you free up some of the problems that have self-created over time because we've always done it this way. So if we can strip things back to the minimum necessary and the value add steps, then we have some opportunity to create that space in our day. It doesn't come without effort, it doesn't come easily, and it needs that time for the creative thinking around it. But for me, there's in the practitioner world, we can't stop, we have to keep going. So we've got to weave this into our day job. And in an ideal world, we'd have some offsite time and we'd be able to bring some peers in to review and analyze. And we do try to do that in our community of practice worlds, where we share what we've done and we try and learn from others. But assimilating in effectively, like while you're building something, building the aircraft while you're flying kind of concept, it's quite a challenge for practitioners on a day job. It's very easy for us to be on stage and say, do this, do that. But actually, we've got to remember people are working their socks off. They are putting in extraordinary effort and hours on major projects, and they're trying to do both the future change on top of the let's deliver to the existing constraints and framework that's already in place. So I feel for people quite a lot, and that's
So
what we've got to do there, help them.
So I spoke to a client recently, and they said, right, recognizing everything you just said about how people are maxed out, they've got a project to deliver, it's got some clear milestones. If it overruns, it's £1 million a day or something, right? If we run some of this in parallel and do some shadow running, that's when we can start to prove it out and to de-risk it and to upskill people. So any thoughts on that, Breda?
My first question is, who's going to pay for it? Because actually that is one of our barriers, and we can't do everything for free. We need to be able to weave these kind of solutions in. But sometimes clients don't buy that. They buy the idea of the expertise, but not the actual effort that goes with it. So we do have a bit of a challenge around that, and we're always looking for that opportunity to reuse and redeploy what we already have elsewhere, so that we're minimizing that cost to clients and minimizing the effort on teams. I'm not saying there's an easy solution, but for me, that's one of the most obvious and significant barriers, and I'm sure I'm not alone on that.
So that's from a supplier's viewpoint. What's your view from a client's viewpoint, Joe and Andy?
Go on, Andy, you come in. I'll follow you. I've been talking a lot. Go on.
I think there's an element here. If I, come back to my opening introduction, I started my career in projects, but working for an organization that was very much sort of a tech firm that was rooted in manufacturing. So they were a process-driven organization, and they focused on optimizing those things they did with a high degree of repetition, and by understanding, the performance. And if you look across the where that's done, things like marketing and retail and of course manufacturing do that all the time. And when I moved into the, from the smaller projects to the larger projects within the same organization, we started to use the expression, but this project's unique. That won't work here because it's unique. And I think we've got to stop using the unique card, because although projects are unique, and in even taking our biggest projects that we have in the UK today, there's only one HS2 in progress, although you could say that there are some other rail infrastructure projects that are similarly of scale. But the tasks within those major projects are highly repetitive, and we can be applying, our data analytics on improving those aspects that, have all the same characteristics as are in other sectors and industries that are using data analytics and have been using data analytics. So I think we also need to attract, the data professionals into the world of projects, because that they're not as welcome as they are in other domains where there's high demand for them, and they know what they need to do because it's a well-trodden path in those sectors.
And Joe, you're going to come in?
I was, yeah. It's sort of, I suppose, I really want to understand how clients can be better clients then. What is it the best clients do that create the environment? Because I do think it starts with us. Clients have to set the environment totally for you to be at your best. Because what I find is that our delivery partners are doing extraordinary work and I never hear about it. I'd love to be using it. I'd even love to invest in it on some of our bigger projects, because we can. But we don't talk about it. So what is it that a really great client does that creates the environment that you feel you can bring these ideas forward and you'll be heard and we'll do what we can? Because we do get feedback that we are, sorry, I paused and then came in, that, that I think we do get feedback that we are a good client, but what? We need to be doing better. I think we all do.
Yeah, I mean, if I could just put in there actually, because obviously I'm doing a lot with the MOD, and I think that the MOD is getting it right. Equally, the government's released recently the digital playbook, which is a fascinating read about the commercial evaluation of digitals, and it's got a lot of standards in there. Equally, the UK MOD's released a digital strategy, and when you look at all these, the intentions there, and what I love from the MOD, and I've even listened at DSEI conference of the Brigadier General who's in charge of this sort of innovation, is the concept of evergreen. And the problem is that this is world of Simon, not KBR, that the customer and the clients are transforming digitally and can't keep up as much as the companies and the customers aren't. And the relationship that's needed moving forward is a collaborative together relationship. That's what I love about this open source concept that we're talking about today. But I think the barrier to success at the moment is no one can quite work out the contractual relationship of how to contract an evergreen partnership. People are using frameworks, call-offs, things like that, but that's not it. If you want a true partner, you really need to just, put all your chips in the middle of the table with someone or a partnership of people. So if you look at our solutions that we have to provide for these really getting ever growing complicated MOD bids, there's no longer a prime who delivers it. Every winning bid is a partnership of 3 or 4 people. Look at the nuclear sector. It's 3 or 4 people coming together. So it's almost like it would be great if the government can start contracting and thinking about these frameworks that you can get in on. And I know it's it's how, you know, you're putting all your shoes in with someone for maybe a 3-year +1+1, and you're going to start having that headache. But that for me is, you know, why it's difficult for customers to contract out at the moment. And we're still in old habits of old contractual change. And what's great to see is customers and the government is now got rid of the PFI model because of Carillion collapse, and they're doing more on value. It was a drive to bottom of line for like 5 to 10 years, and at least the customers now saying through the digital playbook, we value, you know, we're looking for value. So it's happening, but it's just there's a lot of behavior, as I said earlier on. There's a lot of people in businesses who are 40 plus, 50 plus, who are catching up with themselves, thinking in this space.
So
Yeah,
Joe,
sorry, go on, Martin.
so building on that, right? So you've got your cross-government working group. You're now in the seat for it. You've got big vision. It feels like some of this is in your hands, right? There is no controlling mind in government for this agenda. You know, I've been looking for it for 4 years. There is nobody, right? So it sits with you and your team of cross-government. You know, it's personality driven, right? It's driven by people who understand it and swallow the red pill and can see a very different and transformational future. So just explain what your vision is. What's your message to people working in government, and what does it mean for people like Simon and Breda as part of the supply chain? So just share that picture for us.
Yeah, happy to, Martin. And you're getting to this point with a cross-government working group has been the effort of many people, and you know, too many to mention here. So it's a privilege to be chairing it now, but you know, full recognition to the people and organisations, particularly the MOD and Catherine Poyner at the MOD, who worked with Martin to get it this far. As a cross-government working group, so it's got organisations, well, departments including the MOD, Nuclear Decommissioning Authority, the Met Police, NHS, highways, national highways, you know, broad range of organisations coming together voluntarily to make a difference through project data analytics. And the whole idea being that if we work together, we will move things so much quicker. And if we truly, truly collaborate across government, and there's nothing stopping us doing it. And as government clients, again, we have, you know, these are our big levers. We can transform an industry, we can transform the profession, and it doesn't need a law. It doesn't need a policy. It needs leaders who are motivated not by ego, not by self-interest, but by making a difference for the greater good. And that's ultimately what unites us on this group. So we are now starting with various problem decomposition statements. So what I referred to earlier, and we've just recently started an initiative around benefits realisation, you know, major issue always across project delivery. Benefits realisation, starting a problem decomposition to understand how is it we move this forward? How is it we raise the bar on problem decomposition? At the Environment Agency, we've started one on releasing capacity. And in time, all of these problem decompositions managed through a graph database will start to join up, and we'll start to see how we transform a profession, and we can all take a part of that. We don't all have to do it 6 times over. Each one of us does a separate part of that, and we share it. We open source it. We bring everyone along with us. Now, let's be clear, that's good, that's great. But it does take our delivery partners to change with us. That, you know, that yes, the client has a massive role to play in setting the climate for what's expected and what's important and what should be valued. Very different to what we value now. But there'll be a requirement on our delivery partners. At the moment, our delivery partners don't collaborate enough. I don't think there's enough sharing. There's you know, just trying now to get health and safety data put into a construction data trust, health and safety data. It should be really straightforward that companies just want to share that so that we drive up health and safety performance across our industry. Why wouldn't we want to do that? And yet the reticence to not get involved. Because what? Because, oh, where does it end? Am I giving away my commercial advantage? Well, you choose what's more important. I know what I choose, and as a government client and as a cross-government working group, we're going to be specifying it. So again, those who don't want to get on board will not be on board. So it's doing the right thing for the right reasons by good people, and that's what we're leading. Thank you, Martin.
That's brilliant, Joe. So it sounds like, you know, we talked about, is this a transformational? That is transformational, right? That is really, really transformational. So what Joe's saying through the vision of the cross-government working group is that if you work collaboratively and you work to these principles that's been sort of talking about, then you'll start to move the bar. So what does that mean? So a question for Breda and for Simon. So what does that mean if you're in the field? Because there's a lot of consultants out there who's thinking, right, I'll take all this data, I'll develop my own tools, and then I'll sell them back to Joe, and I'll give you some other data from a different government department that I'll sell her as well, all right? Because that's what we've been doing for like years and years and years. Does it start to break your commercial models? Does it disrupt your industry? You know, are you going to be solution vendors? What does all this mean?
I'm just trying to find the background. One of our background. There we go. I have a bunch of backgrounds from the corporate company. This is zero harm to our processes and our IP. I hardly ever put it on there. I was working on for exactly that reason. There is you can't get away from it, an attitude of this is our value proposition. This is our differentiator in the marketplace. Now, when I first met Martin at a hackathon and he presented this concept of open collaboration stuff, because of my training and my background and my commercial acumen, it was so many bells in my head. But then I've given it a lot of thought, and I had an epiphany on a walk one day, and I was realizing the value of proposition, the differentiator in the future for supply chain is not the data and it's not the process, it's the people who actually can work it. So I think, you know, I'm trying to now explain to my company, don't be scared of lifting and shifting basic PPM tool data. You know, Microsoft has put lots of money into this, and if it wasn't for Teams and Office 365 and Power Apps and Power Query, let's be honest, it used to be there was no differentiator between people because it was Oracle or it was, you know, it was the main sort of people that a supply chain would use. Now there's this world of, we've created the ability for everyone in your company to become a developer. Like a process, a problem in a business is now something you can automate and improve through data. And actually, if you can bring lots of modules together open source, that's amazing. And then really a company that can, the company that's going to succeed as a value proposition and a differentiator is someone who's actually using it properly with the right people, with the right skills. And that I think is brilliant. So I think if we can, as leaders and in business, actually say data isn't the value proposition, it's the people, that would actually get a lot of leaders away from that bloody background, which I refuse to put up normally, about processes and IP.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on. But it's a different world, right? A lot of people have not woken up to this. And Breda, what's your take on it?
So what we do in my group is actually we build the solutions for our clients. They're not ours at all. So we genuinely don't own the solution. We don't own the data. What we bring is the skill set to create that in each client environment, and generally they're long-term projects. That said, we are building tools for our own business to make ourselves more efficient and to enable us see our own data properly within our own different sectors. And there are a lot of tools and gizmos, and there are a lot of solutions being developed, all for the right reasons, and each of them will have its own purpose. But ultimately, some of that is effectively open source from our perspective. It becomes that in due course when they're ready. And it isn't about the actual tool itself. It's about how we read the insight from the data and how our people can apply their intelligence using that insight to change the future.
Yeah, it's about superpowered project professionals. Yeah. Cool.
It's the consultant mindset. The problem is when you're a contractor, a contractor solution is very much what we're talking about here, but a consultancy, this is the problem. The layer, and this again, where what can customers do? The whole model of client, consultant, contractor, supervision consultant, contractor is actually a barrier to a lot of this. Project 13 from the Institution of Civil Engineers is sort of trying to bring this enterprise model together with people sort of collaborating more. But I think really, I think someone said earlier on, if we were to run projects if we were to blank page how projects are run better in the future in the new world, get rid of this governance that is created, which actually is barrier to all of this that we're talking about today.
Cool. That is fantastic.
So just one last point, sorry. One of the things I think I do more often off my project time is connecting different people and different clients and different projects so that they can actually have the dialogue that they need to have to see how others are working, how they're performing, and what they're using. It's quite valuable, more so than selling any solution. It's about connecting people so that they can have a different thought process and apply that within their own environment. We forget how valuable that is.
Love it. Love it. So what I'd like to do now, we've got a few minutes left. And can you run on a little bit, folks, just till like 5 past or 10 past to open the floor up? Is that okay? So if you want to come off mute, if you've got a question for the panel, now is your opportunity. So if you just want to ask your question and point it at somebody, or leave it open to the panel, please feel free to come off mute. Now is your opportunity. Anybody? There must be people out there who's not afraid. Russell Willis is now partying in the house with his prize money.
Martin, there was a question in the chat. I didn't want us to ignore it from who?
I do apologise. Where is it?
It's at 1925. I'd like to better understand the data background of the group and how deeply they believe the data-driven project delivery professional needs to be versed in the complexity of data structure and dynamics. Should we all be more of a data product manager for more successful delivery of data analytics projects? That was a great question.
It is. I like that. So who fancies going at it then?
To know, it's a hard one, isn't it?
No, this is exactly what we're dealing with. I was hoping to bring that into the project importance question. It is very much a gut feel decision making project management. So I spent the last sort of 20 years being a project manager, and now I'm in the world of governance and oversight. So I'm sort of poacher turned gamekeeper, and a lot of people within a project have been hiding away from having database decisions, legal, commercial, quality, a lot of these, but now everything gets brought together. It's so important to understand the data structure, because if you look at people have been talking about dashboards, well, actually, behind that, as we all know, are multiple sources of information run by all your departments. So now your HR department can't hide, your legal, your commercial, your procurement, your supply chain, they're all feeding into what I call a PMO, a virtual PMO. And a project manager, a lot of people used to think data was only a product of a PMO. It's actually wrong. The thing with the new world is it's being pushed down where the project manager has a PMO on their screen. It's set up in a way now that you don't need a PMO to bring it all together and to tell you what's going on in the traditional siloed sort of time, cost, quality. I call it the trifecta of project controls, that in the future, all PMs are going to be trained to do their own risk workshops. They're not going to need a risk specialist. They're going to have to do their own updating of things, etc. Because that's the point. The data is going to be pushed and the way that they work goes out. So part of the training, to answer the structure and the dynamics, is we're doing a 6-month campaign of all senior leaders and project managers to understand the literacy of data structure management. What is a dataverse? What is a data mart? What is an API? What's an ETL process? Why is it important? And I took what Andy said and I wrote this down. The data strategy, I think, is a great idea for every project. I thought I was doing one for corporate. I didn't think of pushing it down to every project manager doing it. So I think that's by making everyone do that data strategy, they're going to have to write about their data structure, aren't they, and where it all comes from, and who are the owners, and who to chase if they don't feel it's right. Because we've all sat in meetings where they've gone, I don't believe any of these figures. You know, well, now you know the structure, chase it up. Oh, that answers my bit.
So that's really great, right? And I think there's a question about this data product manager. Now, if Harry's there, I'd like to probe that a bit further. So data product manager, it could be you're managing data as a product. So as a project manager, you've got data coming in and out of your projects, coming through your supply chain. You've got to manage the data flows. You've got to manage the integration of that data, the way you gain insights from it. That is a process end to end in its own right. But there's also all the solutions that come out of it. So are you a product manager in terms of managing that pipeline of solutions? So Breda has now talked about, you know, we're going to have this solution and that solution and another solution, you know, and those are all internal. We're talking about managing some of that through the visions for 2025 work I talked about before. So those will be the modules. So that needs a product manager. So I think there's a challenge about what do we actually mean by product manager? I'm going to the market at the moment to actually ask for one of these people. But product manager is the wrong word, right? It's more of a problem decomposition, trying to get inside the problem and then trying to map out a route map to solve it. I think that's what it is. And I don't think product manager is the right title. You know, I've been using it inside my business, but the more and more I think about it, I'm not quite comfortable with it. So any thoughts on that? And if Harry wants to come off mute as well and chip in, then please feel free to do so.
Didn't it used to be called business? I mean, that's the whole point of Power BI. People lose the fact that BI stands for business intelligence, and the fact that before all the very first originators of what we're trying to do now at project level was business intelligence. And a lot of, you know, I've got a good friend who works for British Gas in business intelligence, and that data product manager, I'm going to say as well, I thought it was lending it. I watched another great plug, Martin, one of your posts I was trawling through. I think it's Vulcan Vessels did this really cool presentation on how they did the roadmap transformation, and I watched an hour of it going into London on a train, and I just thought it was absolutely fascinating how he created the chief digital officer who was presenting this, how they captured all of the products that they were innovating within the business, not just through Power BI reporting, but through all the apps that they were developing. And for me, it's made me really think, and within every business now, we need to find a way of capturing all of this. Otherwise, we're going to have all these apps and solutions all over the place. So that's what I thought the data product manager was.
Yeah. So I think, you know, you need to look at an enterprise level, a department level, a functional level, a project level, and an individual level, and it needs to be layered. And there's a product, and there's also data pipelines. So data is a product. So especially if you're a client, so if you're in something like High Speed 2, most of your product of data, you've got no right to it, right? So they would see somewhere between 5 and 15% of the overall data. It's not in any contracts or anything like that. So is HS2 actually bothered about it? No, they're not, because, you know, HS2 will finish and then there'll be another high-speed rail and they'll start again. But as government, it's the wrong approach, right? Government needs to be treating that data as a product because it's got a huge amount of value in it for society, for all of us at a functional level, right? The way we do engineering, the way we do integration, it's got so much societal value. So we need to change the way we see data as a product in its own right. And Joe, it'd be great to work with you on the cross-government working group on changing that thinking, right? There's no money at the moment in a project is to say that is the codification of our experience. Let's go and do something with it. Yeah. You just fund the project and then move on and go and fund it all again with a different supplier and go and make all the same mistakes again. You know, we need to flip it upside down. Yeah. So any more points on that? And if anybody else wants to come off mute,
I've got a quick point on that one, Martin, if I may. It's Russell Wallace here.
Russell, just before you
Can you hear me?
Harry was about to come in then. So it was
Yeah,
your question.
I'll wait.
Hi, I'm trying. Oh, you all see me?
Yeah, go for it.
Hello.
Yeah.
I am connected to most of you, and Joe, a big fan. My comment was that I have a strong data background, project management, portfolio management background. And when I was managing projects, once in a while I get a red flag, you're getting too close to the data. We know you know your data stuff, but you have to leave it to the data engineer, data designer, scientist. It's not the hat you're wearing. You have to focus on risk, start, stop point, and all the good stuff around project management. But that was my pain point, and I was just wondering where you all stand with respect to that. Data has all of its attributes, and to your point, Martin, the solutions around it, it has, kind of it's an entity, it's an object, it's a product. So, and there is no start and stop around that a lot of times. So you can say, hey, you can chunk it up into tasks and say, I want this much data pulled out by such and such date, or have this one dashboard developed, delivered on that date. But it doesn't always work like that. We have to keep it dynamic. And the client wants, a good understanding, insight in some, form of data, for instance, and that is a very long-term effort. And so you have to focus on products a lot. So that's always been my struggle. And I'm just wondering what everybody's background and take was on the differences.
And I'll tell you something, that makes my heart sink, right? And you're not the only person who said it to me. So I had somebody today, so I've been teaching on the apprenticeship all day today, and somebody says, I'm learning all this stuff, Mike, but the client don't want any of it, right? Just not interested. They're just interested in risk management and project management, whatever. And these people are just, it's draining them. They've got skill sets, they've got the potential, they've got the enthusiasm. People like yourself, we need to get out educating people and saying we should be embracing what you've got with our open arms. You've got the knowledge, you've got everything to change the industry, and it's people out there who need to be embracing it, not turning it off. That's so soul destroying. Anybody else? Any comments on it? Breda?
It was a big question. I'll frame my answer this way, in that I've been around these big databases for all this project controls data for many, many years. And the ownership of the data comes from the originator. We need to get better quality data in. But when we're analyzing data, bear in mind, we've been running all kinds of dashboards in Excel and PowerPoint for many years. Power BI is just the newer model of it. So we have been doing this for a very long time. And we do know where the data flaws are. We can already spot them when things and trends are going wrong. We just have to be brave about telling the bad news sometimes. But again, I'm all for people being empowered to look at the data from multiple angles and see things afresh, and to be brave about talking about it. So we've got to talk about the so what impact of everything we're looking at. But we tend to revert to type and be traditional all the time, and that's the piece that bothers me the most. So we have a huge data legacy with big databases these days, big APIs, potential, and in each new job we build them all over again. So that's what's kind of infuriating, that we're trying to lift and shift now from one program to the other. So the reusability of product is really at the top of my list. And even to the construct of the data management models that we've got going on, that should become more standardized, not just for us, but for the supply chain feeding in to our client environments, so that it's easier for them. We're making hard work of it sometimes. So everyone has a role to play. Everyone has a contribution. We can all change and we can all adapt. It's just about enabling that much more easily than we have in the past.
Cool.
But data ownership and data interpretation sits with all of us.
Great stuff. Thank you, Breda.
Okay.
And Russell, are you there?
Yeah. Yes, thanks, Martin. So I had just a couple of quick comments that tie into those that have been made already, and it's been a great discussion so far. Thank you, everyone on the panel. But firstly, data as a product, I don't like that terminology. Personally, I prefer to refer to data as a commodity. So if data is a commodity, say it's like it's a raw product, it's not a marketable product immediately until it has gone through some kind of stabilization, standardization, verification, and validification, etc. Then it becomes a product, and then you can sell it to the business as having value. And to do that, you need to then also market the process of converting it from the commodity to the product. And I think that's the first initial obstacle that many organizations coming into the data landscape now are facing, particularly when you think about the paradigm, as you already made clear. You know, there's a long history of people working with what they termed data, and it was data, but it was very unstructured, dirty data. And there's a huge inertia in many multiple machines in trying to enable a change in direction of these big machines is very challenging.
Yeah, and we've got to view the data differently, right? It can't be viewed as an exhaust plume anymore that goes into a SharePoint file and never sees the light of day again. You know, a Crossrail is a prime example, and I always use that on the apprenticeship, is that it's nobody's job to leverage that Crossrail data. It's nobody's job. You know, there's no money for it. It's nobody's terms of reference or anything. So we need to change the narrative associated with it all. So folks, it's 12 minutes past the hour. I think we've run out of time. I would like to thank you all. You know, I think it's been a fascinating conversation tonight. The world is changing, right? And people like Joe and the Cross-Government Working Group are going to change that at pace. And it's not just changing in the UK. There's people in Australia, in the US, who's watching us, right? So we're going to change the world, folks. How cool is that? Yeah, it's you guys who's doing it. So thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be working with you all. And thanks a lot to the community as well. We can't make it happen without you. So keep in touch. Tune in for the next one. Make sure you sign up for the hack. It'll be great to see you there. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody.